Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with an update on the World Championship 2020, who will challenge world champion Magnus Carlsen for the world title. This is my second video. The first video was number 484 and I will make sure I keep you up to date on this long road towards that World Championship match. A lot of chess to be played between now and then to determine the challenger. In early 2020 the Candidates Tournament will be held with 8 players and they will play a double round robin. One player we know in that Candidates Tournament, that's the loser of the last World Championship match, Fabiano Caruana from the USA. There will be 2 finalists from the Chess World Cup later in 2019. The top finisher in the FIDE Grand Swiss Tournament held on the Isle of Man, that's a new event as a qualifier. The top 2 finishers in the FIDE Grand Prix. One player will qualify by rating and 1 wildcard selected by the organizer. This video is about the FIDE Grand Prix. I've marked it there in red because that series of tournaments has already started. In Moscow in Russia in May 2019 there will be 3 more events in Jurmala and Riga in Latvia in July, Hamburg in the north of Germany in November and in Israel in Tel Aviv in December. All the players who qualified for the Grand Prix will play in 3 of the 4 events and the top 2 finishers after the last event will qualify for the Candidates Tournament. Each tournament has 16 players and this is the bracket from the Moscow event. You can see the 16 players there on the left and it was a knockout competition and you can see there on the right the finalists were 2 Russians in Moscow, Alexander Grishuk and Ian Nepomniachtchi. Nepomniachtchi won and leads the Grand Prix with 9 points. As said, the next event will be in July in Latvia. Nepomniachtchi's toughest event was Radoslav Wojtaszek from Poland in the semi-finals. Their first 2 classical games were drawn, then 2 rapid games were also drawn. So blitz games had to be played and the first set of blitz games was with 10 minutes and a 10-second increment per move. It's not really a blitz game. If you have a game of 60 moves with that time control, then you have 20 minutes per player for 60 moves. That's not really blitz time control, that is still rapid. Anyway, the first game was also drawn, so we had 5 draws and I will show you what happened in the 6th game in this clash between Nepomniachtchi and Wojtaszek. Nepomniachtchi white, Wojtaszek black. Let's have a look at the game. It was played on the 25th of May 2019 and Nepomniachtchi opened with e4, c5, knight f3, d6 and bishop b5 check. Nepomniachtchi is avoiding the main Sicilian lines as Wojtaszek is one of the biggest experts in the world on the Najdorf, which would get on the board after d4, c takes, knight f6, knight c3 and then a6. That is the main line of the Najdorf. And Nepomniachtchi did not want to test his opponent in this line. So bishop b5 check was played, like he played in earlier games in this match. Knight d7 to shield the check, d4, c takes, Nepomniachtchi took with the queen, a6 kicking the bishop, bishop takes, and knight c3, e5 kicking the queen back to d3, rook c8, Nepomniachtchi castled, h6, knight d2 and queen c7. The players follow the same line as they had played in the rapid game. h3, knight f6, Nepomniachtchi played up the a pawn, bishop e7 from Wojtaszek, rook d1, black castled, knight back to f1 and here a new move. In the rapid game played about an hour before this game was played, Wojtaszek played bishop e6 and the game ended in a draw. But here he played d5. Apparently Wojtaszek was told about this move in the break during the games, but he did not have time to check all the details. He was just told about the main ideas by his seconds. Black is trying to equalize immediately with this move. It is a pawn sacrifice and Nepomniachtchi took it. And then knight e8. And Black's idea is to block the d-pawn with knight e6 and then expand on the king side with his majority there. But Nepomniachtchi is not allowing Black to execute this plan. he gives back the pawn straight away to get the d5 square for his knight and for his heavy pieces on the d-file. Quite instructive, this. Bishop takes d6, knight d5, and now it is not good to take a pawn. Don't take on c2, because then queen takes, rook takes, and knight c3, trapping that rook on c2. The next move will be knight e3, and then black will have to give an exchange. After knight d5, Wojtaszek did not take on c2, he played queen c6. That queen was attacked on c7 by the knights. Knight f2 e3, so far so good, the game is in the balance, but now black commits a horrific blunder. He should have played f5 here, or bishop e6, as was given in a live broadcast by Grandmaster Yufa and Grandmaster Mirotnichenko, but Wojtaszek played bishop c5, and that's a terrible move. Wojtaszek said in his interview after the game, it should not have happened, of course, but if there are nerves, then such mistakes happen sometimes. And Nepomniachtchi said this is such a bad move that it is like blundering a queen. Here we see a screenshot from the live pictures. Nepomniachtchi has just played b4, and if you look carefully you can see that he's staring at his opponent to check if Wojtaszek knew what he had done. And why is this so bad? What is bad about bishop c5? Well, the problem is that white immediately kicks that bishop, b4, and the bishop has to go back where it came from. So black loses 2 tempi. He cannot take on e3, for example, because knight e7 is a fork. After b4, you have to keep protecting the e7 square, so the only move is bishop d6, and as mentioned, that costs 2 tempi, and white plays c4. He's carrying out a plan that he may have wanted to carry out anyway. The main threat now is c5, because of that knight fork on e7. King h8 doesn't really help, because then c5, bishop back, and knight e7. It is still a fork on 2 of black's major pieces, but the bishop on d7 is hanging as well, so actually white wins a full piece here. So king h8 is not the solution. What to do after c4 with a threat of c5? Wojtaszek played b6 to cover the c5 square, but now a5 played immediately by Nepomniachtchi, trying to remove the defender of the c5 square. He cannot take on a5 because then there is c5. Wojtaszek played e4, attacking the queen, hoping that white would take that pawn, accept the pawn sacrifice, because then maybe there is a bit of counterplay starting with f5. But Nepomniachtchi kept the pressure on with queen d4, did not take the pawn. Bishop e6, trying to get rid of that knight on d5, and a takes b6. Wins a pawn, and it's not just a pawn, it's a far advanced pass pawn, well supported by the white pieces. Wojtaszek took on d5, Nepomniachtchi took back with the queen. If you now take the pawn, that's not possible, because there is still c5, and now it is a fork. So after queen takes d5, Wojtaszek saw nothing better than swapping the queens. Nepomniachtchi decided to take back with the rook. Bishop takes b4, winning the pawn back, but rook takes a6, and now this pawn is very, very dangerous. Knight d6, covering the b7 square. Wojtaszek is still fighting, but b7 anyway. A very nice tactic, which wins a piece. Let's see how it wins a piece. If you play rook b8, then there is rook b6, and black has a problem. The bishop is attacked, and the bishop has to keep protecting the knight, otherwise the knight falls, and there is really no way to do that for that bishop. There are no safe squares that the bishop can keep protecting the knight. You can try rook takes b7, but then rook takes b7, knight takes b7, and rook b5, and that's a double attack on both pieces, and you cannot save both pieces at the same time. In a live broadcast, another variation was shown, which was even funnier. Rook b8, rook b6, rook takes b7, and then rook d takes d6. Very nice move, very funny move. If you take that rook, then you lose that rook, and white has an extra piece. So after b7, rook b8 does not work. Wojtaszek took on b7 with the knight, but then there is rook b6, and again we are forking both pieces, and white will end up with an extra piece. You have to be careful, you cannot play the other rook. Rook b5 would be a big blunder. It also forks both pieces, but then there is suddenly knight c5, counter-attacking this rook on a6, and black is back in the game. But Nepomniachtchi played the correct rook, rook b6, and here Wojtaszek resigned. Let's look at a few variations. Knight c5 does not help, rook takes b4, knight d3, but just rook b1, and white is winning with his extra piece. Let's look at another variation, rook b6, and then bishop c5, then rook takes the knight, bishop takes e3, bishop takes e3, and yes, you can take on c4, but for somebody of Nepomniachtchi's strength, this is very easy technique. So it was a handshake after rook b6, and Nepomniachtchi reached the final, where, as said before, he beat Alexander Grischuk. 5 draws in the semi-finals, and then the win in the final game for Nepomniachtchi. If that game had been drawn as well, then the players would have gone to blitz games with 5 minutes and a 3-second increment. If the score would still be even after those 2 games, then it would be an Armageddon game. None of the matches in this first World Chess Grand Prix event went to that final set of blitz games. Hope you enjoyed this video on the long road to the 2020 World Championship match. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. If you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. This is Rick from Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.